This is my son Justin, my firstborn son, my most precious, precious child. I guess the words that I think about with my experience with what happened to Justin is I was totally lost and confused, horrified, and devastated at the end. When Justin was 21, he got in trouble for something that he shouldn't have done, and he was sentenced, and he started his sentence in 2011. During the whole time that we were going through the process of Justin's sentencing, I always told him that it would be okay. He had done something wrong and he had a consequence, and he had to pay the consequence, and then he would be able to get on with his life. When he was sentenced to 2 years, we talked about that frequently. And Justin knew that he had done something wrong and he had a consequence. But I had no idea what that entailed. If I had known then what I know now, what I've learned, especially from Karen at the Wrongful Death Institute, I probably would have made some different choices. But Justin did get a 2-year sentence that he started. He first went to which is the, according to Justin, the scariest place on earth. He started at and then he was moved, and I just, as an educated mom, did my best to try to understand the system. And then he was at the transition center, and he was so excited to be transitioning out at the end of 2012, about October of 2012, and he got a job. And when he was at you pay for your transportation back and forth to work, and you were able to get out during the day and go to work. And Justin was very excited. He was working at a car wash in Marietta, and he had been named supervisor, and he was so thrilled. One of my favorite last texts from Justin was November 28th of 2012, where he's telling me the good news that he was named supervisor, and it was the first time that someone where he was working from the transition center had been named supervisor. He was so very excited. And then I had just the most devastating week of my life, and it started on January 21st, that Monday morning, like at 1 o'clock in the morning. I got a phone call from an officer at the transition center telling me that Justin had not returned from work, and asking me did I know where Justin was, and I did not know. They called my sister as well, who lived in Atlanta, and she didn't know where Justin was. I called the transition center later that Monday morning to find out that Justin had fallen asleep on MARTA. They had verified that with MARTA, and they had picked him up and he was back in the center. But they would be holding him because they do this mandatory drug testing. And they said to me if he was found with any drugs, then he would be in a whole lot of trouble. I totally understood that. On Tuesday, I still had not heard from Justin, and on Wednesday I hadn't heard from Justin. So I called the transition center again. I knew he hadn't been at work, and I spoke to the counselor, and the counselor told me that Justin was being held there because they had done a drug and alcohol test on him, and if he had been found positive, there would be, most likely he would be sent back to, which I found astounding because is a high security facility where death row is in, and I thought if my son who's in the transition center gets caught with having come in with alcohol in his system, his consequence of that is to go back to that. I couldn't understand that. But then later I found out during that day that Justin wasn't being held at the transition center still. He was already at work because he had already been cleared of having any drugs or alcohol in his system. So I'm talking to the counselor, I'm getting very upset, but Justin's actually at work that day because he had been cleared, and there wasn't any problem. So obviously there was no communication, and she was just using that threat that they use all the time to those guys. Right before Justin died, there had been a case internally where a young inmate had a cell phone and taped the threat of going back to if he didn't pay the guard. I think it was $1,500. So there is an ongoing problem with those threats, and the guys are so concerned about getting sent back to which is a hellhole, scary, scary place. that they would pay $1,500. It just is mind-boggling what is going on inside those systems. But Justin was very upset about the upset that had caused my sister and I, which is why when he went in on Thursday after talking to me, he talked to the officer that had called to say, please don't talk to my mom or my aunt. It just upsets them. If I do something wrong, it's my responsibility. And, Justin was taking care of his mom and his aunt. Thursday I talked to Justin. He was fine. Friday was a very cold day in Atlanta, and most of Atlanta was shut down because of ice. But because Justin was an incredibly skilled guy working with his hands and could fix anything, they allowed him to go to the car wash to work on the underside of stuff. And he had seen my sister, talked about seeing her later on Monday because she was going out of town. And he went to work. And then he went back to transition center. And then what happened from there is just one big confusion. It is the absolute worst day of my life, January 25th. Apparently, Justin came back to the transition center with other guys. He came in and he asked for what they call the save tray. And the save tray is your dinner. If you're out working, they save a tray for you. The same officer that had called me on Monday morning asking where Justin was, well, Friday, this is the officer that Justin asked for the save tray. And there were some apparent words exchanged, and Justin was thrown into the hole. Justin never came out of the hole. Justin died in the hole of the transition center. I got a phone call on Saturday morning from the superintendent telling me that my son had hung himself in the hole. And I can't even begin to explain how my world crashed at that point. There is no word to describe that feeling. I didn't understand at all because Justin had been so upbeat. But immediately we started getting phone calls and text messages from the guys inside transition who had a very different story from the story that Superintendent had shared with me. That Justin had come in, that he had been drunk, that he had gotten into an altercation with an officer and had been put into the hole, and that several times they had checked on him and he was fine, and then an officer went in to put him in his jumpsuit and they found Justin hanging. Once I could get my bearings about what I was being told, I started to contact an attorney, a civil rights attorney. I tried to find out more information. I was so confused about the speed of the autopsy. Justin was found dead about 12:30 on Saturday morning, and his body was released later that day. They had done some whiz-bang autopsy where they really didn't find out anything because they really weren't looking for anything. I didn't realize how all of the entities cover for one another and they go on lockdown. They lose things. So when I started requesting different reports, I found that reports were missing, time logs were messed up. I went and picked up things from the transition center. I was met immediately and ushered right into the superintendent's office, who was there to let me know that she had given me her personal cell phone to call her if I had any questions at all, that she was there for me, and she was just as devastated. But later she went on to say that she had commended her staff for the way they had handled the death of my son, which was just about more than I could bear to hear. I was able, after many months of open records request, able to get the GBI audio interviews with the officers that were involved. I was able to get the sign-in logs, etc. Nothing matched. Everything was haphazard and came in different packets. But what I found most just confusing to me is I'm in public education, And anytime you put anybody in isolation, you make sure that they can't harm themselves. That's like your number one priority. Well, my son was put into the hole with his shoes on, with his shoelaces on, with his belt on. He wasn't handled, and I could never find any protocols or procedures. There seems to be this huge lack of protocols and procedures in the corrections facilities, particularly in transition centers. I couldn't find any information of how it should have been handled. I was amazed that there were cameras in the hole. We have cameras on school buses, we have cameras in all classrooms, but in somewhere like the hole, there's no camera. So there was no video documentation of what happened. The most unsettling part for me was that the guys inside of who I can't tell you that what I would pray for was protection for my son from what I thought was who might harm him, was the other guys. What I found was they all have each other's backs, because the people they needed protection from were guards that would do things like sell them cell phones and then take the cell phones away and give them some kind of penalty for the cell phone, charge them exorbitant cost for the cell phone. Because they were in the transition center and they were so close to getting out, they would always threaten them with and that became the big threat. And they would do it every now and again to make sure the threat was true, that the guys knew that they might get sent back to for basically anything. I just found that amazing. And the stories that the guys inside tell me about that night were totally different than I got from the transition center. They told me that Justin came in, he was very excited about getting everybody up early the next morning, that they were going in and they were going to have a really big day, and they were just going to knock it out of the park with the amount of cars they were going to be able to do that day. And he was very excited that he did have an altercation and he got thrown in the hole. His roommate went down there just minutes after Justin had been thrown in the hole, like maybe 15 minutes. And he said he banged on the door and called out for Justin because he wanted to take him a pillow and a blanket, and Justin didn't respond. And he found that very odd, because he and Justin were very close, and he knew that Justin would answer him. All the guys inside think that Justin did not take his own life. I have no way of ever knowing what happened that night that my son died. I do know that as an educated person, a mom, I was totally lost in this system. I didn't realize that it was a for-profit institution. I didn't realize that it was necessary to keep people in, to keep guards, etc., employed. That never crossed my mind. I had the regular mindset that most people do, that inmates have color TV and go to college classes and they earn their degrees. That was not at all what I experienced. I was mailing my son toilet paper. But when my son had the opportunity to work, he was out working and he was contributing. The financial statements from the transition center were a mess. Apparently there had already been problems with accounting for money. Justin would put in a request for money to pay for Marta to get to work, and his request would be denied, even though his paycheck didn't go to him. His paycheck went immediately to the transition center, and then he would have to request money. Frequently he would be denied money, which was crazy. I still was helping him out with money even though he was working. When I lost Justin and I was trying to navigate the system, I was so lost. I was so fortunate one night to run across the information of the Wrongful Death Institute and get a hold of Karen. Immediately she contacted me and she helped me know what kind of questions to ask, who to contact. When I would tell her what I was told, she would ask me more questions, and she directed me in the path to understand. She has such a wealth of knowledge about the system, the system that I had no idea how to navigate. She knew the right questions to ask, and even though we weren't able to pursue a case with Justin, the Wrongful Death Institute and Karen helped me so much, at least be able to understand, so that at this point I can make a video to draw awareness to what's going on inside the corrections facilities in the United States. When Justin was in all of the three different places, the three different facilities where he was, I made Justin cards from hand, cut out little things, just kind of a thing that I do. And when I went to pick up his things, the superintendent said, the agent that had gone through Justin's locker said he must have had a mom that loved him a lot, because he had kept all the cards that I had made him, and that was priceless to me. Justin was priceless to me. My son made a mistake. My son had a consequence, but my son should never have had to pay with his life. Either he should have been put in the hole and proper precautions should have been taken, where he would not have been able to hang himself, or something else happened that I'll never know in this life. My goal is to let other parents know what happens and to let not just other parents, but the public understand that our perceptions of the corrections facilities are not accurate. What we think and what we've been sold as, we need to be tough, etc., that's all fine. But what really happens to people and the manipulation to people who have to pay a consequence for something they did is not right. And one other thing, with Justin's case, I was told that most likely if we did pursue a case, it would be settled out of court and I would not be able to talk about it, and that was just totally unacceptable to me. I want to be able to talk about it. I want people to understand what is going on in the corrections facility. My son's not here, but the memory of my son will continue. This is my son, Justin, and he should be with us today. He should have been released just several months after he died, and he should be out there living a productive life. And instead we're sharing a video about the horrors of the corrections facility and what we went through. Again, I highly recommend to anybody learning more about the Wrongful Death Institute and learning more about the corrections facilities from someone as well versed in the system as Karen Russo. Thank you.